98.9, Centre, 97.3, Est-Ouest, 91.7.
RMR, it's 1:09. The news with Eris Stewart. Good morning, Eris.
Good morning, Sophie.
We start with the headlines.
Assistant Police Commissioner Dhanraj Gangadin appears in court following arrest by the Financial Crimes Commission over a 160 million rupee transaction. 5 years since Wakasho, scars of an ecological disaster remain as Mauritius marks the 5th anniversary of the MV Wakasho oil spill. World Drowning Prevention Day sees calls for better training for fishermen. Finance bill on Parliament's agenda today for the first and second readings of the finance bill, with debates expected to conclude by July 31. Bank of Mauritius reports modest export growth. Imports still far exceed exports despite signs of economic stabilization. In world news, France to recognize Palestinian state at UN in September. And in sports news, England versus Spain in women's Euro final this Sunday in Switzerland. Assistant Police Commissioner Dhanraj Gangadin will appear in court this Friday following his arrest by the Financial Crimes Commission. The investigation concerns the reward money scheme used to compensate police informants. ACP Gangadin was questioned for 8 hours yesterday at FCC headquarters regarding 160 million rupees that passed through his bank account. He spent the night in custody and is expected in court today as provisional charges are revealed. He is the fourth senior officer arrested in this case, following ACP Lilram Dial, Sergeant Yeshdeo Siborat, and ASP Faraz Munirat. Both Munirat and Siborat have applied for bail. Hearings are scheduled for July 31st and August 1st, respectively. On July 25th, 2020, the Japanese bulk carrier MV Wakasho ran aground on the reefs southeast of Mauritius, sparking one of the country's worst ecological disasters. Just days later, the vessel split in two, spilling around 1,000 tons of heavy fuel into the ocean. The toxic slick contaminated miles of pristine coastline, suffocating marine life and threatening the fragile ecosystem of the region. For local boaters and fishing communities, the impact was immediate and devastating. And 5 years on, the scars of the Wakasho disaster remain, both visible along the shores and invisible in the lingering damage to the marine environment. Ashibachu tells us more.
It's already 10 a.m. and Blue Bay Beach is already buzzing with tourists and picnickers. The boat operators are also at work. But one question remains: has the Wakasho shipwreck and the oil spill truly been erased from their memory? For Nelan, the scars of the disaster are still visible on the coral reefs. They removed the ship and sank it in deep seas, but there's still metal debris in the lagoon. We dived behind the reef and saw how much metal is still there. Not just metal, but oil as well. I don't see the government addressing it. Many corals have died, so have many fish. There used to be lots of marine life in the park. Now we barely see any. There were once over 15 sea turtles. Now we are down to just 7. Virginie Orange also recalls the lasting impact the oil spill has had on boat operators like her, an issue she says remains unsolved. We were fortunate to work as a family, so we made arrangements to deal with the financial fallout. We sold a boat, 2 engines. I even sold my house, but not everyone was in the same situation. Some are still struggling. There's one young man whose boat was badly damaged by the oil. He was left without a boat for 4 years because he simply did not have the means to replace it. That's just one case. There are many more. People are still waiting for a solution. We weren't asking for compensation, but at least for some sort of reimbursement for the loss of income, since the lagoon was closed for 18 months. Dr. Arvin Boulel, who was a leader of the opposition at that time, points the finger at the previous government for reacting too late. They bear responsibility as well. We were saying back then, remove the ship, but no one listened. There was clearly a delay and proper measures were not taken. To this day, many people are still waiting to receive what they owed. Nearly 1,262 people were compensated with a one-off payment of 112,000 rupees. But for many, this sum does not begin to cover the damage caused by the oil spill. 5 years on, the scars of the Wakasho disaster remains.
And staying with news related to the sea on this World Drowning Day, every time they go out to sea, their lives are at stake. Yet fishermen remain among the most vulnerable to the risk of drowning. According to the authorities, 6 fishermen have disappeared at sea since 2020 to date. Judex Ramphal, a fishermen's union representative, is thus calling for training tailored to those who make their living from the sea. Didier Rose provides more details in his commentary.
In this profession, it is important to know how to swim, especially deep water swimming. You need people with good endurance so that if they ever find themselves in difficulty, they can stay afloat on the surface of the sea. We need experienced people from the sea to train them.
And now moving to Parliament, where parliamentary proceedings will begin at 3 p.m. today. On the agenda is the presentation of the Finance Bill for its first and second readings. Debates on the Finance Bill are expected to begin next week and end on July 31st. This bill will enable the implementation of the measures announced in the latest budget. 2 other bills are also on the agenda, one concerning the Rodrigues Regional Assembly and the other on various economic measures. The Bank of Mauritius has published its latest figures for June 2025. Overall, the Mauritian economy is showing signs of stabilization compared to the previous year. However, exports have grown more modestly from approximately 103 billion to 110 billion rupees. As a result, the country still imports much more than it exports. Following Prime Minister Dr. Navin Ramgoolam's confirmation that US President Donald Trump has sent an official letter to begin negotiations on customs tariffs applied to Mauritius, these tariffs, which currently stand at 40%, represent a real obstacle to Mauritian exports. According to Lilauti Rajman Jusiri, director of the Mauritius Export Association, these high tariffs could have repercussions not only on exports to the United States, but also on markets in Europe due to globalized supply chains. This is why the US President's letter has been welcomed. Commentary is voiced over by Nyema Nayana Reddy.
It's good that they know how to swim, but they also need to know the basics of life-saving and first aid so that if one...
The deadline for the US tariff remains 1st August. At MIGZA, we are asking the government to include AGUA in the negotiation. Thanks to AGUA, we currently don't pay any customs duties when entering the American market. However, the US tariff is currently at 40%. If, for example, AGUA is not renewed by September 13th and the tariff remains at 40%, we will be impacted twice in terms of cost. That's because on top of the production cost, we'll have to add customs duties and in addition a 40% import tariff. With these 2 extra costs, compared to our competitors, we simply wouldn't be able to export to the US market. This would seriously jeopardize all our exports to the United States. And I must add that it will have a domino effect on other markets, such as Europe. At MIGZA, we therefore welcome the current negotiations between Mauritius and United States.
And it's 9:10. You're listening to RM1, where we move to international news. French President Emmanuel Macron announced on his X account that France will recognize the State of Palestine in September at the United Nations General Assembly. France will thus become the first G7 power to take such a step, which the Hamas group has described as a positive step, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has condemned a decision that rewards terror. Since the spring, the French president had repeatedly pushed for this recognition. It was initially scheduled to take place last month at a conference in New York with Saudi Arabia, but the outbreak of war between Israel and Iran led to him to abandon the plan. And we're moving on to sports, finally, where the Women's Euro final will take place this Sunday at 8 p.m. In Switzerland, pitting England against Spain. This final will be a rematch of the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup final, with defending champions England facing world champions Spain in Basel. That's all from me this morning. Thanks so much for tuning in. Stay tuned to the Intermediate playlist until 10 a.m.
Bienvenue, vous écoutez RMA Nord-Sud 98.9, Centre 97.3, Est-Ouest 91.7. RMA, la nouvelle radio.
Left